Hey, this is WhyBeAre with BeamNG.drive, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Gravil Grand Marshal Square, which is a modification of the regular Grand Marshal that changes the looks of the vehicle, but doesn't do much to the performance of the vehicle, and it changes the looks in a very interesting way. So you have the normal Grand Marshal right here, and then you have the Square. And they look very similar, yet every single body panel on the Square is different. So the bumpers, fenders, doors, hood, trunk, and then even the roofline are all a little bit different than the normal Grand Marshal. So I like to think of the Square as maybe a predecessor to that Grand Marshal. It might be the previous generation, or maybe it's the prototype before they decided to smooth out the body panels, something like that. But when you drive this thing, it feels exactly like a Grand Marshal. The only real difference you'll ever notice is the changes in weight when you get to some of the different versions, because this is still a regular four-door sedan like the normal Grand Marshal, but there are some more interesting versions we'll be taking a look at in a bit. But first, let's go ahead and look at this one. So just a quick look at the body panels. You can see all of them are just more squared off and less smooth than the normal one. That's why it's called the Square. What inspired this? I'm not exactly sure, but it's an interesting idea because it just makes the car look older than it really is to me. Like, it makes it look like a car that's, like I said, the previous generation. So right there, just a small impact that actually tore off the wheel. We can keep accelerating a little bit, try to get one more impact before we actually look at the damage. All right, those are two pretty good impacts. And looking at the damage right there, don't notice anything too unusual. Maybe a tiny bit of spikiness in the front fender, but 99% of it looks all right. Hey, that headlight's kind of floating actually, isn't it? The magic headlight. You can't tell it what to do. Can it turn on still? Oh, it can't turn on though, but it can float pretty good. So let's crash this one a couple more times, and then we're going to move on to the next Grand Marshal Square. Since we did frontal impacts right there, we'll go ahead and try to do a rear impact in the city. So we'll drive until I see a spot that looks good. All right, I see a wall down there. We're going to use that wall. So we'll spin it around, and we should be able to get up to a pretty good speed before we actually make contact with that wall. I swear this thing is just as fast in reverse as it is in forward almost. Perfect hit. Fuel tank ruptured. Tire flat. Very damaged rear. Looks all right, though, in terms of the way it was damaged. Can still drive the car, so we'll try to pop up the front a little bit more. Maybe right into that light post if we can get up to speed. So there's a middle front impact, and both those impacts really just caved it right in the middle. Looks funny. Both the front and rear just super smashed in, but the corners are okay. Let's try to keep that theme up. Hit another light pole. Did we keep the theme up? Yes, we did. It is still just bashed in on the middles. How about the rear again? Can we drive? Yes. I'm surprised this thing is still driving. I don't have much steering capabilities at this point, but I can still at least accelerate a little bit. Overall, though, after all those impacts, I noticed no huge significant issues. So overall, pretty decent deformation. Ooh, a little bit of fire into the mix. Fire is always fun, and it's always loud. I don't know why, but the fire is always super loud. Although this time, it's actually not that loud for once. Oh, there it is. Now I can't hear myself think anymore. That's better. Well, not better. It's just more what I'm used to. So anyways, that is the V6 SQ, but there's a lot of different versions. There's the V6 SQB, SQE, SQDB, SQA, and we're just going to do them alphabetically. So next up is the SQA, and that one is very, very, very similar to this one. The difference is that rear pillar right there, and actually probably the easiest way to show you the difference is to have one of each. So let me go and spawn back up a regular SQ. On the SQA, this whole corner right here is the exact same color as the body. On the regular SQ, the corner is the same color as the body, but there's also this black part right here. Now the doors are the same, so it still has that black part, but it doesn't have the secondary black part. Now those things seem to deform pretty much identically, so I'm going to only do one crash with this thing, and then we're going to move on to the next version, which is going to be the SQB. I'm trying to do them alphabetically because that makes the most sense, but they're not alphabetized in the menu, so it's a little bit of a mess sometimes to find the right one. Now, almost every version of the vehicle has a different grille, so I'm not going to say this one has a different grille, this one has a different grille, this one has a different grille, this one has a... Instead, I'm just going to tell you right now, watch for the grills because they're usually different between every single version. There's a lot of different variants. Anyhow, going to bring this thing up to hopefully 70 miles per hour so we could get a high speed impact since we didn't do that high of a speed one before. We're going to hit the tree right on the edge, hopefully. There we go. So we got a little bit of damage to the roof, and then some damage to the hood as well. Overall amount of damage right there seems pretty reasonable, and no significant issues with the way the vehicle's damaged. It'll still drive, so we'll drive it a little bit more I don't think it's going to quite get up to speed like it was before, but we should be able to get it up to at least highway speeds before we do one more collision. Highway speeds being 65 miles per hour is my goal. All right, 65. And then let's just try to clip some trees. Perfect. And again, the way the vehicle is damaged, it all looks pretty reasonable. So now let's go ahead and move on to the next version of the vehicle, which is the SQB. And since it's all disorganized, sometimes it takes me a second to find them. That one was actually pretty fast. So comparing this one to the one we were just driving, it once again has a different rear pillar that's similar, but different. This one here, it has a window right there, so you could actually see through it. And if you're in the car, you could peek through that window and be like, hello. Well, you can kind of peek through it from here. Yeah, you can peek through on that one. You can see what's out there. So extra visibility, it's a safety feature. That's why they did it. In addition to that, the piece of trim that goes all the way around the car has been completely removed. And the engine in this thing is really, really weird. It revs to 20,000 and is really fast. This is one of the few ones where it has a huge change to the way the vehicle drives. And I'm trying to control it, but it's so fast it's kind of hard to control it, which makes it really good for slamming into trees, although you can't see much because the tree is covering it up so hard. But I don't see anything inside of the tree that looks like it would be considered glitchy, so we'll just respawn it and drive it a little bit more because it is fun to drive this one. It's so weird to drive, but it's fun to drive. All 20,000 RPMs, making use of them. Well, not really. And yes, I'm rounding 19.5 up to 20,000. Deal with it. So we're going to be going 100 right here, just fly into a tree. That's how you do a nose stand. And one of the parts that flew off of my car caught on fire. What was that, my fuel tank or something that flew off? I don't know what flew off. Just a ball of fire fell off of my car accidentally. Those come from the factory like that, with the balls of fire. I just accidentally let it out. The next one we're going to be taking a look at is the SQBB, and BB stands for baby because it's only a two-door version of the vehicle instead of a four-door like the ones we've driven up until this point. So you can see the rear pillar is very similar to the one we had before. It's a little bit thinner, and then we have a big window in the rear instead of a door. So lots of rear visibility on this thing. Excellent rear visibility. And for some reason, it seems like the field of vision on the interior of these vehicles is a little bit higher than normal. I never really did any comparisons because I never actually went in the interior, but now I'm actually sitting in it. It's like, that feels a little bit different. Also, there's a dash camera, so that's the normal kind of look, and then the other one is the crazy one. All right, I got it. So it just has another camera option, basically, and I never noticed that because when I was doing the testing, I just used a single camera. So anyways, we're going to try to deform this on the side. Let's see if we can do something like that. That got some damage to where the door is. And interestingly, the door is being held on by the rear. So it looks like it's a suicide door, kind of. And I tried to look so hard at the door, I crashed into a tree. We could still drive, though, so we'll keep driving. I'm going to try to tear the door off, hopefully. I just got to find a tree that's sticking out a little bit to grab it on. There's a promising tree. Bye-bye, door. See you next time. And we only have 3 wheels, too. That's impressive that it's actually pushing this hard for how slow of a vehicle it is normally. That fast with 3 wheels is something. So anyways, let's go ahead and say hello to a couple more trees. Or not, because I can't steer to the right because I only have 1 wheel. Oh, it's slowing down now. Okay, let's just go whatever crash I can get. There we go. And once again, deformation looks pretty reasonable for the impacts. Except for the part where the door was acting kind of funny. Now, I'm curious, if you actually try to open the door, does it open? Yeah, it opens exactly as you would expect. Can we actually rip it from the front again? No. So just somehow, the way it crashed, it caused the door to fall off, but hold on at the same time in a really unusual way. That's probably one of those crashes that's 1 in a million, and it's not really worth judging the mod based on that, but it was interesting that it happened. I mean, the amount of damage I did to that door trying to duplicate it really just proves the fact that it wasn't an easy thing to do. Try to bump that door. Perfect. I love doing that where you bounce the door off of things like this. Just bounce it. Oh, that's not bouncing the door. That's bouncing the front fender and the front bumper instead. We could still drive this, but I think it's time to go to the next version of the vehicle, which is the SQBC, which is also a 2-door version of the vehicle. But there's a difference in the rear pillar, and to show you that off the easiest way possible, we're going to spawn it up right next to the SQBB. So right there you see rear pillar. It goes straight down. The other one's much more sloped, so that gives the back window a slightly different shape as well. And then your interior looks a little bit different when you look behind you in terms of visibility. Also, there's some interiors on the vehicles where it's more squared off, like this one. You see, like, there's no smooth corners even on the inside now. It's a little bit easier to see it right there, nice and close to it. So we're going to try to crash this thing a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next one. So it's not that fast, so we're just going to try to throw it into some trees on a downhill slope for maximum impact. Maybe it'll flip over or something. Get a little bit of damage to that roof. No, not really. Well, we got some damage to it on the front and a little bit on the door as well. Take a look at all that. Once again, it looks pretty reasonable. Where the door hits the pillar also looks pretty good right there. So we'll bring it back, go to the next version of the vehicle, which is the SQC, which is a convertible version. So I have to assume the C stands for convertible. Now this looks like they just took the normal SQ and they just chopped the roof off of it and said, we are done here. We have made a convertible. So the roof strength is a lot less. And one of the things that's interesting is when you crash on the front like that, you can see the whole windshield kind of shifts forward because it doesn't have the structural strength a real convertible would have. On a real convertible, that would be reinforced, so it would be stronger in case you were to roll over. On this one, since it's not reinforced, if you roll over, the top of the vehicle caves in really easily, which would mean your head is scraping the pavement really, really easily if you were to flip this thing over. Now, the nice thing about flipping is whenever you want to do it, you can never do it. When you don't want to do it, you always do. So I'm going to try to flip this thing, but if it doesn't work out, we'll just manually yank the car upside down. I think the easiest way to flip it is kind of just right up on a wall like that. It basically hit the side instead of the roof. Well, I shouldn't say roof because it doesn't really have a roof. The point is, it didn't actually hit the windshield. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over lightly like that, and then we're going to just try to lift it upwards and then drop it a bit. So like that's like if it had actual impact, and you can see just how much the windshield is bent and the doors have bent. Everything's bent. And if you're a taller person, yeah, your head is touching the pavement in that situation. So anyways, on to the next version, which is the SQD, if I remember correctly. It's hard to remember this because it's not like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's A, B, 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 C, D, E, F, G, or something like that. So D, though, is the Wagon. D stands for Wagon. Didn't you know that? Don't you know your alphabets? So this one does feel a little bit heavier than the ones we were driving before because it feels even slower than the Grand Marshals we were driving before. And I just want to point out real quickly while I remember, all of them still just say Grand Marshal on the rear. There's no special labeling that says Grand Marshal Square or anything like that. This one's a little bit more rounded feeling than the other ones. That might just be because it's a wagon, so wagons are naturally a little bit more rounded than sedans. And we're going to try to do some damage to the rear. Easiest way to do that is to slide it into something. So I'm looking for a tree. There's my go-to tree. So you go like this. Good damage to the rear. Should be able to keep driving perfectly after that collision. It actually did like no damage to the way the vehicle actually drives, it feels like. Just visual damage. That's the ideal crash for something like this. So we're going to try to do the same on the other side. That one, not so much. Overall, though, the way the wagon held up looked pretty good. There's a couple of pieces on the roof where it just disappeared, which is a glitch that sometimes happens. And it is something I think can be improved on to make it happen less frequently, but it can be a pain to solve that for the person who's making the mod. So that's the D for wagon. Next one up is the DB. So if it's DB, it's still going to be a wagon, right? Well, actually, yeah, it is right. The difference between the SQD and the SQDB is that this one doesn't have the rear glass in the rear. Instead, it's a non-transparent material. And then the bumpers are ever so slightly different. And the headlights are different as well. Sometimes the headlights are different, just like the grill. Didn't mention that earlier, but you probably saw it when you were looking at the grills. And deformation-wise, it feels identical to the other one. So we're going to do one crash with this one, and then we're going to move on to the last one, which is the SQE. So there's a front impact, which doesn't tell you much about the wagon itself, except for the fact that the roof has bent a tiny bit because it has such a long roof. It doesn't have the ability to stay too straight on a collision like that, I guess. And now the car's immobilized. Bring it back. Go to the next one, SQE, as I said earlier, which is way over here. All crazy and out of order. Now, the last one was a wagon. This one's more of a hatch or a lift back because it's a lot more sloped in the rear, where the other one was a lot taller in the rear. Then you have a bigger piece of glass as well, so you can see even more of the car. And once again, though, it feels just like the other one, where it's a little bit heavier than the normal version of the vehicle. And is pretty slow. I'm going to crash this same spot we just crashed the other one, because I think if I do it right, we could get some damage to the... Nope, we didn't. We didn't do it right, so let's just fling it up into the air to get some damage. There we go. There's some damage. Once again, that looks reasonable. Every crash so far has basically looked reasonable, hasn't it? How about that? I mean, that'll look unreasonable no matter what because of how damaged it gets. So actually, the whole rear is just exploded like a pyramid. The piece of glass has broken out. But nothing that's exceptionally bad for that kind of forceful impact. So on to the next one, which is, well, actually, we're done with the alphabet, but we also have SQB Taxi and SQB Cop. Same as the normal SQB, basically, but then it looks like a cop or it looks like a taxi. There is the SQBB Race, though, which is more unique, where it's a modified version of the two-door made for racing, so it's a lot faster than the normal one. And you notice on the thumbnail, sometimes the vehicles have color, but they always come in this cream color, no matter what. It also handles a little bit better than the regular SQBB, if I remember correctly. And we'll just do a couple of crashes with this, and then we'll be done. I'm not going to bother with Leap of Death or Brutal Slope because there are way too many variations to actually do that for it to be interesting. I mean, you've seen me be damaging the important parts that are actually interesting to see, so there's absolutely no purpose in doing that anyways. So how about this time we try to drop it into the water. See, can we clear that? Oh, no, we cannot. But we can make it happen with a little bit of force. And I think that'll do it for this episode. So until next time, this has been WhyBeAre. I'll see ya.